Hello and welcome to the session. In today's session, we'll be discussing about cache mapping and input-output organization. A little bit of cache mapping we had discussed in the last session. We would like to continue this particular discussion and in fact deal with some of the cache mapping schemes in more details. But in order to understand cache mapping, where exactly is your reference material? Reference material is block 2 MCS 12. So that is what you should be referring to. In today's session, whatever we will be discussing, right, some of the portion may be useful even for BCS students, BCS 011 students. So if you are watching, then you can utilize some of the information which is provided, although some of the discussions may not be comprehensible by you, but try to understand whatever we are discussing and you will be able to make out something of this particular session. The outline of today's presentation, we will be first discussing about a little bit of cache memory, then we will go to some IO device, magnetic disk and CD, and then we will discuss about IO techniques. The sequence is slightly changed because of the basic, the way we are going to express those concepts. So let's see how we are able to perform this particular session. Now to begin with, this is what we discussed last time, the memory hierarchy, right? So we have a hierarchy of memory and the slow memory is whatever we say slow memory is the maximum in size, whereas fast memory is slowest. Fast memory is very low in size, and the prime reason for that is the cost, right? Because of the cost, this memory hierarchy is there. In the last session, we had discussed in major details about this. But what is the need of cache memory? Now that is what we once again understand from the point of view of our first session, which we did for von Neumann architecture, VON, right? So von is VON, that's what you should remember, the pronunciation for that scientist. All right, so now what we are referring to, that the von Neumann architecture simply says that any information which is to be processed by computer, right, has to be in the memory of a computer. And that memory of the computer has to be very, very fast. But in practice, the main memory of computer is found to be 20 to 50 times slower. So what we need, a faster memory between the main memory and the CPU registers. Okay, so between the CPU registers and main memory, we have a memory called cache, right? And cache basically is a small memory, but as we discussed last time, the principle of locality ensures that most of the references, all the references of instruction and data will be technically to main memory. However, they will be fulfilled by cache memory. Now this is what is the essence of this, and cache memory is going to be very, very fast. So some of the data will be caught in the cache memory and CPU registers will be getting information from cache memory. 80 to 90% hit ratio is what in general you get, and that is how you enhance the speed of overall access, memory to CPU access by around 80 to 90%. So this is how the whole thing works, right? So let's look into the mapping scheme. Well, the first thing about mapping scheme is what we really need to understand is mapping is basically how the main memory information, main memory blocks, main memory words, right? So main memory is referred to in terms of the address. There is an address for the main memory. So how the main memory address will be an equivalent cache address. Now remember one thing, that main memory is small and cache memory, main memory is bigger than the cache memory, right? Main memory may be small, I mean it may be small than the hard disk, but it is quite big. 6 GB is quite big, right? But 8 GB, 6 GB, 12 GB, whereas cache has hardly MBs of size, 10 MB, 20 MB or 30, 40 MB depending on L1, L2, L3 caches, right? So the cache memory is small, so how, obviously we cannot store the entire content of main memory in cache. Only a part of content will reside in cache, right? And how? So basically, where can CPU find a block of main memory? So whenever we transfer information from main memory to cache, what we try, instead of just one word of main memory, we would like to have slightly more number of words which are transferred in one go, right? The advantage of this scheme is going to be, it will facilitate probably the next reference may be to the next word, because we have sequential execution, instruction execution, right? So first instruction and the second instruction, so probably both the instructions are transferred to the cache, so the next instruction will be directly available in the cache and there is no worry about that particular part, right? So that is why there is a need of creating a block of main memory, right? Normally this block size can be 2, 4, sometimes it can be 8, but not beyond that, because beyond that the chances of referring to those units decrease, right? Okay, so and then what we are now referring to, the second thing which is important is how and exactly how you are going to find that where the content of main memory is residing in the cache memory, where it can be. If it is there at all, right, it may not be in the cache memory at all, right, but if it is in the cache memory, how we will find out that this particular address or this particular main memory word is in what portion of cache memory. So this is what that is why we need direct mapping scheme, associative mapping scheme, and set associative mapping scheme. Okay. So the basic terms last time also we discussed. So main memory address, you all know about main memory address, it's a binary address in general. Okay. So if my main memory size is 1 MB, I'll be requiring 2 to the power 20 is 1 MB. So I will be requiring 20 bits, right? So 20 bits will be the size of my address, right? Now if, so this can be further divided into blocks. So if my cache memory, let's say if my main memory is 20 bits and 4 words of main memory are in a block, right? So effectively 4 is 2 to the power 2. So only 18 bits are now for the address and remaining 2 bits are for the block. So we'll discuss this with the help of an example also. Then cache memory has lines or slots, and there is cache address associated with that cache line also, right? So obviously that main memory address is there, so cache line will also have an address, all right? And a memory block of data, right? So in one line of cache, there will be a block of data of a memory, right, in the cache. And which block is there? That is determined by tag number, all right? Okay. Now for the example, let's take a very simple example which is displayed over here. The main memory is of the size 256 byte. As soon as we say 256 byte, it is 2 to the power 8, right? And it is bytes addressable memory, means all the address locations are byte, all right? So these are the byte addresses. Okay, byte 1, byte 0, byte 1, byte 2, byte 3, byte 4, 5, like that. These will go on, right? Okay, and how many bits will be required for this particular address? 8 bits. So there we have 7 bits for the block. Now what we are saying, please note, the memory address is 8-bit long, cache of size 32 bytes, okay, a cache line is of 2 byte. Now as soon as a cache byte is of 2 line, a memory block, right, okay, will be of 2 words, and since a word is a byte, now please understand these things what I am saying. So what we have is a memory block. So this is a memory block. A memory block consists of 2 words, and since in our case word is a byte, so it is basically byte 0 and byte 1. This is what represents the memory word in this particular sense. Now let's move on. Okay. Okay, now what we see, the next thing which we have to refer to here is how long is the address. So how long is the address? 8 bits. Out of those 8 bits, 7 bits, right? 7 bits basically are referring to, okay, 7 bits are referring to a block, and the last bit, 8th bit is 0 or 1, is referring to a particular word or byte in this particular case for the main memory. So this is 7 plus 1, 8. So the address of this particular word or byte is 7 zeros followed by 0. This one is going to be 7 zeros followed by 1. For this 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1 followed by 0. That is 0, 1, 2, that is what you can see. This is going to be 3, okay, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1. So this is the third location, and like that. So this is how our addresses are arranged, all right. And the cache addresses are, there are the line and numbers, right, and the size of the cache is 32 bytes. So, and 2 byte, we have one line has 2 bytes, so therefore we have only 16 lines, right, 16 lines of cache of 2 bytes each. So the bytes once again are shown like this, okay, and cache line addresses this, okay. So cache line address will vary from all zeros, 4 zeros, to all ones, that is 0 to 15. So they are 16 addresses. That is how we have the cache and the main memory. So this is the main memory and this is the cache memory. Now I have included this aspect, the modulo function, just to explain a very special point to you. And this is something which we have been doing a lot of time. Whenever we are doing the cache mapping scheme, okay, I'll convert it in, I'll try to give an example to you, an example of real life. Suppose there are 16 department in a particular organization which require meeting rooms. So what the organization does, it creates 4 such meeting rooms, all right. So what the organization has done, 4 meeting rooms. Now how the meetings in those 4 meeting rooms can be scheduled? There are multiple ways. One simple way may be, whosoever requests, give him 1 meeting room, okay. So first, second, third, and whosoever wants it, give him the meeting room. That is one possibility, okay. The second possibility may be, we allot, right, we allot these 4 rooms, okay, in such a fashion that they go by number, okay. For example, suppose we have the team number 1, right, or department number 0, okay. So department number 0, when we divide it by 4, okay, what do we get? The quotient will be 0, remainder will be 0. So the 0th number meeting room, okay, will be allotted, can be allotted to the department 0. Department 1, the first, okay, based on the remainder. Department 2, the second. Department 3, the third. Now department 4, once again when we follow the modulo, we divide. So what is the quotient now? 1. 4 modulo 4 is 1, that is quotient is 1, and the remainder is 0. So the 0th team, 4th team, both may be allotted the meeting room 0, okay. So this is what is somewhere what we are referring to the direct mapping scheme, okay. So 0 will be allotted either to 0, then to 4, first will be allotted to 5, first will be allotted to, that is second will be allotted to 6 and 7, and similarly as we go on, 8 will be another candidate for meeting room 0 and 12 will be the last. So 4 candidates for meeting room 0 are going to be 12, 8, 4 and 0, right. For meeting room 1, it will be 1, once again 5, then 9 and 13. Likewise, for meeting room 3, 15, 11, okay, 7 and 3. So haven't we done some kind of scheduling? In one sense, okay, so if the meeting room is not available, they won't be allotted, okay, this particular meeting room. So if 0, okay, if the 0 meeting room has been allotted to this team number 4, fine, okay, it has been allotted to team number 4, others cannot get that meeting room, they might have to reschedule their meeting in that particular case, okay. So this is how this direct mapping or direct modulo which works. Now this particular direct modulo function has very interesting property when we go to binary data. What you can see here is, in case of binary, if I take modulo of by 4 for this particular, now this is once again meeting room, there are 16 teams, so 0, 0, 0 till all ones, right? So we have 16 teams and we take the same modulo which we have done, modulo by 4. So what we get when we take modulo by 4, remainder, you can check, remainder are identical. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. What is the case here? What is very, very important, that out of these 4 bits, the first 2 bits become some sort of tag, identification tag. This is team 0, right? This is team 1, team 4, right? Team 4 or the second team which can be allotted this particular room. Then there will be the next team, the team, right? So this is technically team 8, but this is different, like it's another team, second team and the third team. So the only 4 teams, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0 and 1, 1 can be allotted to this particular room 0, 0. And that can be simply identified by breaking this particular address into 2 parts. One is first 2 bits and last 2 bits, okay. So this becomes the tag number, okay, which of the 2, okay. So this becomes the tag number. Tag number clearly identifies it is either 0 or the 4th team or the 8th team, alright, or the 12th team, okay. So this clearly identifies, they are all different, okay, and all the 0, 0 basically identifies the importance of the meeting room. So the important point which I am trying to tell you here is, this is what we are trying to refer to, that how the main memory address, okay, so this can be taken as a main memory address, can be divided into the cache address. So cache address is going to be this only, but if tag number of the cache which identifies which team, right, which team presently is having access to that particular location. And that is the whole philosophy of direct mapping cache. So let's translate that particular example into direct mapping. Now direct mapping is very simple technically, okay. The only thing what we need to learn, how the addresses are going to be mapped, alright. So each block of main memory can be placed only in one cache line. So block of main memory, as we see, this is a block of main memory, byte 0 as well as byte 1, okay. And this green bit, basically out of these 8 bits, the overall address is 8 bits. So this green bit basically represents which of the byte. If it is 0, then it is byte 0. If it is 1, then we are referring to byte 1. Alright. Then this particular address. Okay. On this particular address, if you can compare, we have all ones here. Alright. So how we are going to identify this, whether this particular address is in the cache or not, that is what is to be checked or is to be specified. Blast हुआ था यहाँ. Please sir, right. Okay. Okay, now direct mapping address structure. Okay, so let's refer to that direct mapping address structure. So cache address, cache size is 32 bytes, alright. So we are referring to cache byte as 32 bytes, okay, and 1 bit basically cache address is what we are referring to. So 32 bytes is the cache. So obviously we will have only 16 line because of 2 bytes in one particular line. So we have 16-bit address. Now how a main memory address will be mapped to cache, will be checked, how it is going to be checked, that is what is important. So the first thing, this we are following the direct mapping scheme. So there are 54, how many bits are there in the cache line? 4, right? So all those 4 bits basically represents, these 4 bits represents which cache line this particular address can reside. Okay, so it basically identifies the line number, just like I stated about the team number. Okay, so this is basically this can reside in the any of these line numbers. The second thing is going to be which, now there can be multiple possibilities. It can be all zeros, 001, 010, 011, like that. Okay, so 8 possible values are there, okay, for this tag number, okay, which represent a different block of main memory which can stay in this particular location. Which one is presently here? It is this one, but there are other also which can stay in this cache location, okay, because cache numbers the cache lines are less and memory size is more. Okay, so this is what the mapping is all about. So tag basically identifies whether this address is available in the cache or not. Okay, so an address 110, all 4 ones and 0 is not present in this particular cache line. Why? Because the tag does not match. The tag for that number will be 110, and the address which is stored in this particular cache memory is 111 followed by this particular 111 and on so on. So this is how we are mapping directly into a cache line. Okay, this is direct mapping. Okay, these 4 bits determine which line a particular address will be cached. All right, and just extending the discussion we had about the team and the meeting. So what we can see very clearly, cache line or the index, if it is, so cache 000001 up to 15, so 0 up to 15. Okay, so basically what we are using, modulo 16 function. So if a value is 0, okay, so 16 once again will reside at all zeros. 16 once again you get 0. 32, modulo 32 is you will get 2. So tag number is going to be 2, but value is going to be that is the address or the index cache line number is going to be all zeros, like that. Okay, for 1 the that is the modulo function will always yield 16, modulo will always yield 1. All right, so tag number will differ for all these locations. Okay, these are represented in decimal just to facilitate the understanding. Okay, likewise for this you are getting 15, 15 is all ones, 31 it is all ones. So like that you will find the modulo function works in this particular case. So example, let's take few examples in binary. Okay, so memory block address. Okay, so if we are referring to memory block address 001, all 4 zeros followed by 1, where exactly it can reside? The line number is specified by this particular bits. So line number is going to be 0. So cache line number all 0. So this particular address, okay, and the tag number for this address is going to be 001 followed by all zeros and byte 1. So this is what is the cache address or where it is residing. All right, presently residing, but on this location, so this is technically, if we refer to, this is this is 000, so we are referring to 16th. Okay, you can check if this is 16th or 16 on this particular size, and 1 basically that represents the word address. So we are not bothered about this particular one because it simply differentiates between these 2 locations. But our main concern is these 7 bits, how they are mapped, and this actually is equivalent to 16. Okay, so this presently is holding location number 16. That is what we come to know. Okay, it is not holding 32, it is not holding 0, it is not holding 48. Okay, at present it is holding the location number 16. Had it been holding location number 32, then this would have been 010, the tag. Okay, that was our quotient. Okay, so that way quotient would have been here. Had it been holding 48, it would be 011, right? So like that, the tag number is going to change, although this particular address is going to remain the same. All right, so this is how multiple values can be mapped into the cache. But which one is residing presently? That is what CPU wants to know. So if CPU wants to know, okay, CPU is referring to location number 16, it will get it from the cache. But if CPU is referring to location number 32, it will try to find it from here and match with the tag number. And the tag number for 32nd location, as we said, 010. It doesn't match. It means the memory that this particular location 32, okay, main memory location 32, which will be somewhere down here, will be brought into the cache and then it will be supplied to the CPU. And why it is brought to the cache? Because once again, principle of locality, if you are referred to location 32, probably in the near future, you might be referring to that location once again. All right. So this basically is brought into the cache and then supplied. So this is how the cache to memory mapping work, and this is how the CPU is given the content from cache, or if it is there in the cache, fine. If it is not there, then brought into the cache and supplied to the CPU. Okay, the next example is about this location. So this is 000 0001. So this is the tag number, okay, and we are referring to byte 0 in this particular case. That is what the byte 0 is. In the earlier case, we were referring to byte 1, okay, and the tag number happens to be 0. Now in this particular case, okay, in the case of this is the one which we have mapped here, okay, the collision of this memory location could be with this particular memory location. Okay, all right. Now, if we are referring to byte 0 of 111111, it can be found at the tag number 1111. This is the tag number 1111. Sorry, this is the line number 1111. It can be found. So the tag is what you can check. This is where the tag is. So once the tag is there, CPU will be supplied this particular content, and technically this tag represents 127th location. All right. So this is how the cache to main memory direct mapping works. Now why direct mapping? It is very simple. It is very inexpensive, but it has a major problem. If a program accesses two blocks that map to the same line repeatedly, then every access will result in cache miss. Now that is one of the major problem. All right. So if a program accesses two blocks that map to, for example, in our case, as I referred to, okay, so if we are referring to 16 and 32 repeatedly, these two locations repeatedly, then every time you will have so first you access 16, okay, then you access 32. 32 you could not find, there was a cache miss, so the 32nd was brought in here with 010 and the tag number the same, okay. Then we are referring to 16 again, so once again a cache miss, okay, and then we will once again do that particular stuff. So 16, 32, 16, 32, all the time there will be collisions, right? There will be cache miss, and whenever the cache miss is there, the more time is required, right? If the cache hit is there, then the information is supplied, or the access is very, very fast, as fast as registers, right? But if there is a cache miss, then we have to bring that content from the memory. So obviously it is slower than the actual referring to the cache. So this is how the overall access scheme as far as direct mapping scheming and the problem associated with it. Now the second mapping can be just an associative mapping. Just I was referring to this particular thing when I was referring to the example of team and meeting rooms, right? Now any meeting room can be allotted to anybody, right? That is this particular scheme, associative scheme. So if we have a main memory block can be loaded or can load into any line of cache. Tag uniquely identifies block of memory, all right? And cache needs to be examined simultaneously. Therefore, cache searching gets expensive on hardware, okay? So cache needs to be examined simultaneously. This is very, very important. Therefore, cache searching gets expensive on hardware. In our case, the meeting room, we can allot any of those meeting room to anybody. That is going to be better scheme. But in cache, there has to be a simultaneous check from all these locations. All right. This completely becomes the tag. The complete memory address becomes the tag for checking. That means the circuitry requirement. Okay. When we are checking only from one particular location, it is easier. All right. But if we have to simultaneously check from all 16 locations at the same time, it's going to be really expensive hardware. Okay. Because for every line we have to put a lot of circuitry, and that is why, okay, that is why we do not use associative mapping. The example here, what you can see, example that all ones is here, can be anywhere. So it is here. Okay. Byte 0. All right. Then this green one is at the next location. Nobody stops us from any of the location. Whichever is empty, just put the value there. Okay. And like that. Now the situation is, which suppose this cache is full now. All right. So then which one should be emptied and which one should be brought? With what location it should be brought. So then there are schemes for those. Okay. And we are not going to refer to those schemes, but they can be least recently used schemes as we use in operating system, or and so on so forth. The byte which is not utilized, okay, can be changed in that particular, or the block which has been written to by the CPU, right? This is only for reading, but then if something is to be written, it is to be written in cache and maybe at some point of time in the memory. All right. So how exactly those scheme works, those are some of the advanced things which you need to understand about cache memory in a long run. Okay. Although that may not be part of your MCS 12 in greater detail, but these are some of the things, these are some of the questions which you have to pose if you really are going into the hardware design and so on. All right. So this is what is the importance point is, cache needs to be examined simultaneously. Therefore, cache searching gets expensive on hardware. That is why we don't follow the associative memory. In fact, what scientists found, they studied the statistics of various programs. So they found either two-way set associative or four-way set associative are good type of memory. Maximum it can go to 8-way set associative, but they are good type of memories where which can be utilized the associative property in a set. Okay. So two-way means set size will be 2. Okay. In fact, not set size, there will be 2 possible tags which are 2 lines of cache in the same set. Okay, if it is 4-way, then we will have 4 possible tags, 4 possible lines in a set. So now instead of line, we call it set, and in one set it is 2-way. So there are 2 words, 2 main memory blocks which can reside, one here, another here, and both are checked simultaneously. All right. So direct mapping in a set, and within a set, okay, within a set, any of these location, that is associative. So set associative, that is what it is. So divides the cache into a number of sets. In each of these sets contains a fixed number of lines. All right. So 1 line, 2 lines. So this is 2-way set associative. Had it been 4, it would be 4-way set associative. 1 line, 2 line, 3rd line, 4th line. All right. Okay. 2-way. A block of main memory can be mapped to any line of only one set. Okay. So now how will you determine? In earlier case, the set number, this was the tag, not the tag number, this was the line number. Now this has become the set number, and the size is also a bit less, because what we have assumed is a 32-bit memory only. So now 32-bit memory, once again 16 bytes, right? So 16 addresses, and those 16 addresses, 8 on this side, 8 on this side. So each set, okay, so we will have only 8 sets. 8 2s are 16, 2-way. Had we had 4 ways, in that particular case it will be divided by 4, 16 divided by 4, and only 2 bits will be required for the set side. Set 0, set 1, set 2 and set 3. Okay, so these are this would have become 4 set. Since we have only 2-way set associative, so how many bits? 3. Okay, so this is 3. 3 means 0 to 7, which is 8 sets. 8 sets, each set has how many ways? 2. So that means 8 2s are 16 lines, and each line has 2 bytes. So 32 byte set memory. Okay, set associative memory. This is how it is represented. This is how it is. So block size, block address is very, very important in this particular case. Okay, and the block address is going to be depending on, suppose the direct address memory you had the 4 and the set size is 2, so only 3 now, only one less. Had it been 4-way, then only 2. Like that you can calculate, you can study this particular part. And the tag number becomes, what remaining is all the tag number. All right. So this particular, what we are referring to, okay. So all zeros, that means this particular location when we are referring to, it can reside here or here. Luckily, it is available on this part. All right, for 000. In this particular case, once again, this particular byte is residing in this location. All right. And there are two in this particular case, the tag 0011. So this is one of the tag number which is residing here for byte 1, you can see, and for 11. So this is this address is also residing in set number 8. Okay, so set number, you can see the set number for both these locations is the same. All right, and since we are allowing 2 lines in same set, so both can reside. So there is no collision if we are referring to both the locations simultaneously. Okay, so if main memory is looking for this location, it will get it from the cache. If they are looking for this location, it will get it from the cache. If they are looking for similar similar set number 111, and suppose this is 0000, then obviously it is not going to be found. So there will be a cache miss, and one of these two will be emptied based on the least recently used or first in first down and whatever may be the policy, the cache policy, and then that will be brought into the cache. So this is how the overall efficiency, in fact, overall efficiency of two-way set associative is very good, okay, in comparison to direct memory, direct mapping scheme, as well as the circuitry requirement in set associative is much less than the associative mapping scheme. So basically this scheme helps in both the ways. All right. So this is 3 mapping scheme put together into one particular example, and slightly different scheme we have followed. So suppose main memory size is 32 blocks. Now we have just referred to the overall size as blocks. Okay, so blocks can be anything in this particular case, 4 bytes, 8 bytes, it does not matter, because in both the cases we are referring to our basic unit happens to be the block. All right, and cache size is 8 blocks. So in that particular case, this is how my memory is, or my cache is going to be, and this is my main memory starting from address 00 till address 31. All these addresses are once again in decimal just to facilitate the learning. Okay, so suppose I am looking for memory location number 28, and the mapping scheme is fully associative. As we said, any of the meeting rooms, right, any of the locations, this particular address can be found. All right, and if it is direct mapping scheme, so 28, and how many the meeting rooms are there? 8, right? So modulo 8. So 28 modulo 8 becomes 8 3s are 24, remainder is 4, so 4. Right? So this is the 4. This is 4. So this is the basically 5th meeting room. Okay, but the meeting room whose address is 4. So this is where the value can be found. If it is not there, then obviously CPU has to access it and bring it here, okay, and then get it itself for its processing, okay. And if had it been set associative mapping, then all these 8 get converted into 4 sets. So there are only 4 sets available to us, and these sets, okay, so these are the line number of cache 01. Suppose 01 is the first set, although it should not look like this, but just for the sake we have said that this is set 1, this is set 2, this is set 3, and this is set 4. So what we are going to get, it can be either in this particular line or this particular line of set 0, okay, any of the 2 lines. So how we will come to know about which set it is going to be? So 28 divided by how many sets are there? 4, right? So 28 divided modulo 4, what we get? The remainder is 0. So it can be in the set 0. And in set 0, any of those two blocks, any of these blocks can be. So we check both simultaneously. In this we check all 7 simultaneously. In this we just need to check only 2. And in this direct mapping case, the comparison is very, very simple, right? Because we just check for the location 4. So this is how the overall cache mapping scheme works. And I think you will be able to refer to this particular example. Please understand the one particular point, the example of meeting rooms and all that thing which we stated. Okay, it's not it's not 100% conformant to cache memory scheme, because in the cache scheme, what you are basically doing, CPU is looking for a particular memory location, right? And what it is checking is whether it is already available in the cache or not, right? Whereas the example we gave was for the scheduling purposes. So it is slightly different, but the logic happens to be the same, and I think you will be understanding this logic and applying in the related questions related to cache mapping and so on and so forth. So with this we move on to secondary storage organization. Now this is a very important one, and first we talk about a disk. Now disk is a very, very interesting phenomena, and hard disk is, so where exactly the hard disk come into picture? So what we have is the CPU registers. From the CPU register, then we move on to the main memory, and in between we have the cache memory, CPU, right? CPU gets the information from cache and gets it faster, all right? Then what happens, what we know about main memory is that main memory is always a volatile memory. Volatile memory means it loses its content, okay, as soon as the power is switched on, or whenever you basically switch off the machine. The system gets restarted all the time. Okay, this is what you must have experienced. You boot or start your computer all the time, and it takes quite some time to start. Although these days with SSD drives, it takes lesser time, but then still it takes time to start, okay, to get your operating system. What exactly is going on? The first, there are some checks, hardware checks which goes on into the machine, and then the operating system gets loaded into the main memory, okay, and that is what is very, very important step. Okay, because once the data, the operating system gets loaded, what exactly is going on? Operating system is nothing but a set of instructions and some data. So it is just a program, okay, and technically speaking, we are still very close to von Neumann architecture, although we have now virtual memory and memory interleaving and other kinds of concept coming in on in this kinds of thing in this domain, but then technically very close to von Neumann architecture still. All right, so the main memory content gets loaded with the operating system program, which performs lot of housekeeping activity on the computer itself. And on to top of it, once your Windows or your Unix operating system gets loaded, you just enter a few commands, and the execution of, suppose you want a word processor to be running, you just execute the command for word processor by clicking or whatever, or typing in command, and that's how the operating system works. So how exactly? That means this particular data, right, has to reside somewhere permanently, and main memory is not permanent. Main memory is not, it's hardly 8 to 10 GB. So we have a unit which can store lots of information in itself, and that is what is the hard disk, which stores information permanently. Okay, so you can see a typical hard disk being shown, a circular disk. Okay, now one thing which you need to understand, hard disk capacities are huge, all right, but the speed of hard disks is determined by its access time, which happens to be seek time and latency time. We'll refer to this seek time and latency time a little bit later. The next thing which we do, it is always a common phenomena that if you are referring to a slower device, okay, and if data is to be transferred from slower device to a faster device, it is a good idea to transfer large amount of data in a single go. In main memory and cache, we transferred a block, which may be 2 words, 2 main memory words, 4 memory words, 8 memory words. We transferred a block in one go, right? So it may be a good idea, and that is why the hard disk configuration basically consists of, first of all, hard disk is circular, so it will have tracks, all right? So tracks of information can be stored. If you have seen an older gramophone, right, it looks like the same. So tracks, and in tracks then there are sectors, all right. So you can refer to this is one sector, this is another sector, and so on and so forth. So there are a number of sectors, okay. So one sector, there can be 250, 200,000 number of sectors on a track, okay. And there can be multiple surfaces, okay. Now there are what is the time of access of a particular disk, all right. The first thing what is written is seek time. Obviously when I am referring to disk, I have to move from a track to another, okay. My data may not be on this particular track. All right, my data may be on a different track. For example, my data is here, whereas my disk, and there is going to be, right, before we talk about it. So disk, we have a access head which moves, all right, which moves among these tracks, all right. So suppose my reading head is here, okay, this is a fixed head, okay. So my reading head is here. In fact, what you will study, because of the rotation of the disk, there is an aerodynamic gap which is created between the disk head and the disk itself, okay. Because the smaller is the distance, the more amount of data you can store on a particular disk. Anyway, these things you can refer to your blog in more details, but try to understand the logic here. So there is always going to be, the disk is going to be rotating, okay, and suppose my next block of information is somewhere here, that is my sector is somewhere here. So disk head has to move from here to here, okay. So I have sought a particular track, okay, I have done a seek, and then from the seek, now I am referring to, suppose I have referred to this particular sector and my head is here, it has already gone past, and suppose it is rotating anti-clockwise, okay. So it has already passed the head. So there will be time when taken to rotate this particular disk till it comes back over here, and the disk head starts reading that particular sector of mine. So first time was seek the necessary track, all right, and the latency then. Latency is the rotational latency, okay. Now this is the worst case when this particular sector has passed. The best case will be the sector is about to come, okay. There can be other kinds, somewhere sector is here, then almost once again. So on an average, half, right, on an average half rotation is the time of latency, okay. The time taken for completing half the rotation is the latency time. So this is what, when we refer to a disk, what we are referring to. Now random access versus direct access. Random access is what bitwise random, which we said, any location we can access in same amount of time, but not in the disk, right. So but however I can access a track directly, although there will be some sort of seek and rotational latency, but still I can access a particular that is sector directly. So that becomes the direct access. It is not random access, Okay, random accesses for each location. Suppose you have a house, okay, that there are number 10 in a particular apartment, your house number can easily identify randomly which particular house is there, right? But if it has to be done with the help of a disk, then it is a direct access. Okay, now there is another, I mean, some people are confused between direct access and sequential access. It's not sequential access because you're moving to the track and then from the track it is just one rotation delay. All right. In case of sequential access, the sequence is, suppose your house, you are here and the block is somewhere here. So you have to move all the way to that particular place. Here you are moving to a specific track and then the rotation, one rotation. So that is what is direct access, and it is different from sequential access, which keeps on going till the block or data in sequences arrives. Okay. Seek time is defined for disks. Any specific disk, you will find that this is the seek time, that is a standard seek time, and latency time is calculated. So one example we have given, suppose a disk rotates at 10,000 RPM. So time of one rotation is going to be 1 by 10,000 minutes, right? This is our rotation per minutes, okay. And this is 1 minute is 60 seconds, so 60 by, it should be 10,000, right? So 60 by 10,000, what you get is 6 by 1000 seconds, all right, which is 6 milliseconds. So on an average, half of the disk rotation, as I stated, so latency time becomes 3 millisecond for a disk which rotates at 10,000 RPM. It's a good speed, right? Remember this. Maybe 15,000 is maybe the 15 or maximum, if we see today's disk, maybe go to 15 or 16 kind of 16,000 RPM. It's very, very high speed. Okay. Now imagine that even disk with a very high speed rotates at 3 milliseconds. And on the other hand, the memory speed is in nanoseconds. Therefore, transferring a block, which is a sector or multiple sector together, makes sense to the main memory, right? One sector can be around 1 MB these days, right? Okay. So this is how 1 MB will be transferred or 2 MB will be transferred in one disk read. Why? Because this time is very, very low. So I would like to transfer maximum amount of information with the intention that suppose a file is written contiguous. Okay, a file is contiguous, then the whole content will be of the file will be transferred in one go, and that file I'll be referring in the later on. I'll be referring to other blocks of the file also. Now remember this particular thing. You have a disk defragmenter utility, and people say that it enhances your disk, that it enhances the efficiency of disk read and write. How? This is how it is done, because the blocks are arranged then, all right, on similar tracks. So there is no further seek, and in one rotation you are able to transfer a lot of information about a file, right? So all concepts are related. It's not that they are not related in some sense, all right. So this is what is the disk, what we said about the magnetic disk. You can, you can define more things about it, but the main important thing about magnetic disk is the rotational latency, seek time, and there are now there are bit sector wise reading and all those concepts are there if you see the latest review literature, but then the basic concept is this only, right? Rotational latency and the seek time. Maybe for different sectors of the disk, it may be different, okay. Now, important consideration in the disk is, suppose I have a hard disk. So what is there? My sectors are uniquely identifiable, okay. Now, the density of bits here is going to be higher, and over here, because the sector size now you can see large sector now. Okay, same, although each sector stores the same amount of data, but the sector over here is large. So density of bits over here is going to be less. So which controls the density of hard disk? The innermost sector. But that means I'm wasting a lot of space, okay. I'm wasting a lot of space onto the hard disk. Why? Because I want faster access, all right. Okay, I want faster access, random access. In fact, it is not random access, direct access. So and direct access is definitely faster, right? So that is why I use this kind of layout onto the disk. All right. However, in CD-ROMs, we use a different layout where the sectors are divided into equal length. All right. That means if all the sectors are equal length, so if I'm rotating, if I'm reading at the outermost, okay, I'll be moving the disk slightly slower. All right, because the periphery. Whereas if I'm reading from the innermost, the disk will be rotating at a different speed or a faster speed. That means this device will require, or the CD-ROM disk drive will require adjustment of speed. All right. So suppose I'm reading from this block and suddenly I move to another block over here. In hard disk, no problem. Okay. The speed is the same. But in this particular case, first of all, I won't be recognizing which track it is, right? So track where my referred block is going to be. So I need to identify first the track and find out. In this particular case, track number is directly available. All right, track number followed by the latency, right, the sector. So this is where I'll be adjusting the speed and then reading it. That means CD-ROMs are going to be definitely slower than hard disk. All right, so this is what is another way where you can store data, that is CD-ROM. So what you basically are referring to, that is first block, 0 minutes, 0 second sector, this is how they are numbered. So this is, you can refer to once again your block, and you can, the important thing is why or what kind of differences are there between the two. Now from this we move on to an input-output interface. This is what we stated in the memory hierarchy. Now what we have is, on one side we have the CPU, on the other side what we have is an input-output device, and there is a vast gap between the speed of the two. All right. So what we have is interface with the system bus controlled by the CPU, on the other side interface with the IO device. Okay, so this is what you need, some kind of input-output controller which work at the speed of the CPU, which can understand the speed of CPU, but smoothen out the gap, the speed gap between the two. Now how it is going to be possible? How that smoothing can be done? Well, CPU will give some instructions, okay, with the interface in the form of some control lines or some address lines, and then this particular address line, this IO logic will determine which external device it is referring to. Suppose it is a printer, right? Now printer is going to be very, very slow. Suppose it is a keyboard. It's once again, a keyboard is also a very slow device, right? So it will communicate with the keyboard. Now keyboard, the message is onto your screen, but you have not entered pressed the key. So it is just waiting. Printer, the printer suppose is not ready. You forgot to switch off, okay, switch on, then the printer is not ready, right? Or there is a paper jam in the printer, it may or may not be ready. So who will identify all these things? This interface is going to check, this interface is going to see whether my printer is ready or not, right? And it is going to take care. So CPU doesn't have to wait. It simply issues an instruction that, okay, I want this page printed, gives it to IO logic in the form of data register and status register keeps on indicating to the CPU whether the print job is successful or not. All right. So CPU will just refer to it after a while or so. Meanwhile, input-output logic or the input-output controller, this particular interface in your computer, you might have found lots of interfaces in the printer with the ribbons and all that. So all those interfaces have logic and they will be communicating. All right, they will be communicating with the devices. The device, once it finished, suppose the printer started printing the job, it finished the printing, it will communicate that particular thing to IO interface, and in turn IO interface will return this particular information to CPU, which will tell you, okay, your job has been printed successfully. So this is the interface which exactly, is responsible for communication between the two and maintaining, everything is maintained over here, and CPU doesn't have to bother anything else about the printing device. Why? It doesn't have to wait for printing device to finish. As soon as it finishes, the status register is going to indicate to the CPU, okay, the work has been done, now you can issue another command, or if a program is pending, you go and execute that particular program. CPU can do lots of jobs. These days, multi-programming is the basic situation, right? Multiple programs run simultaneously. So CPU will not wait for your print job to finish. Suppose, okay, it will, or it will not wait till you input a particular thing from the keyboard. It will go on to do something else because it is very, very fast and its time is very, very important, right? So it can go on to do many other jobs meanwhile. All right, but that difference is taken care of by the input-output interface. So to take care of these output interfaces, okay, there are several techniques which are used with the help of these input-output interfaces. These three techniques which are there is programmed I/O, interrupt-driven I/O, and DMA. In the programmed input-output, CPU just issues the read command. Okay, CPU then checks the status of I/O device repeatedly. Okay, it keeps on waiting. This is called busy waiting, and this is not recommended these days. Okay, it keeps on waiting. Okay, suppose it is waiting for input of a keyboard, CPU will keep on waiting for your program. So it is not a multi-programming environment. This was the initial programming environment where we had just one terminal and it keeps on checking from that particular terminal. Then CPU reads word from as soon as the word is ready, CPU will read from the word from the I/O interface, write it into the memory, and CPU checks for completion whether job has been completed or not. In the second case, in the interrupt driven, this is much more efficient. CPU will issue a command and then go on to do its own work. Okay, CPU will be interrupted once I/O interface finds that particular job has been completed. So it will be interrupted, and interrupt will be issued. The disk interrupt you might have heard, the keyboard interrupt you might have heard. So all these interrupts basically interrupts the CPU. And at that point of time, CPU is going to take all the content, like suppose there was some input. So input is going to be in I/O interface. That input will be taken by CPU and it will be stored into the main memory by the CPU. And then CPU checks whether the job has been completed or not. So this is for read operation. All these I/O techniques which have been demonstrated here are for the read operation. Write operation may have a different kind of setting. What about DMA? Now DMA is a very interesting scenario where CPU gives a block read. Okay, DMA is called direct memory access, and most of the faster devices like your hard disk follows the DMA mechanism, where CPU says, okay, read these blocks. So it will transfer the address of those blocks. All right. Then the DMA module is very, very intelligent. It is going to take control of your bus and directly put the content into the memory locations which has been specified by the CPU. So the registers are still needed in the CPU because the information which memory locations are to be utilized, right? That is to be told. Okay, likewise, many information is to be given to the DMA module, and DMA module will complete its job, transfer that particular block, and it will interrupt only the CPU once it has completed the job. What is the difference between these two? The basic difference between these two is here CPU completes the job, right? The input-output interface basically interrupts the CPU that the data is available with me, and CPU does that particular writing into the memory, whereas DMA can directly write into the memory location. Still, the registers are needed because some information is still to be passed to the CPU that this particular operation what you have recommended or this particular instruction which you have stated has been completed. So status register is still going to be there, and other registers will be passing on information that these blocks has been written successfully. So this is the way direct memory access works. All right, and this is how your overall system of a computer, basically the von Neumann architecture, works. So we have the basic computer basically consists of the CPU, input-output devices, and the main memory. Main memory is made faster with the help of cache memory. We use several cache mapping scheme, and then we have secondary storage devices to store information permanently, as well as they are very, very large devices. So we use direct access so that the information transfer between the DMA module, right, into input-output interface of a device and the memory is made faster. Okay, otherwise we use interrupt driven. For keyboard we may use interrupt driven interface. So this is how overall computer basically works. All right, in the next session of yours on the Facebook, maybe next Saturday, we'll now move on to assembly language programming. We will not cover block 3 for the time being. We will take on block 3 sometime later, but first we will cover the assembly language program. For the time being, bye for today.